Hello, everybody. Can anybody hear me? All right. The purpose of this live stream is just to take any questions that anybody may have about recent reviews, or if you've got any questions about upcoming things, feel free to let me know. And I think one thing that I will address that was asked a lot in my recent Center Channel video, people asked a lot about what happens if you take an MTM and you stand it up, right? Instead of landing on the side, because a horizontal MTM is bad news. We've already been over that, especially a two-way horizontal MTM. So to quickly address that without, pulling up a lot of data, I can just say that generally speaking, yes, a two-way vertical MTM is going to be okay in terms of the horizontal spread. But the same thing that it suffers from the horizontal lay, like when you lay it down on its side, how it suffers in horizontal dispersion, when you flip it back upright, it suffers the same way vertically, and really just narrows up that sweet spot. The verdict, I guess I can say, is kind of still out. When I had Floyd Tool on sometime last year, we talked briefly about the impact of vertical radiation as opposed to the impact of horizontal radiation. And the notion behind the fact that horizontal radiation is more, I guess it can hurt the soundstage or the overall sound quality more than a discontinuity in the vertical radiation, has to do with the fact that your ears are this way, right? Your ears aren't on top of your head and at the bottom of your head turned sideways. Your ears are oriented this way. Now, I used to kind of understand that a little bit better back when I was really trying to research the mechanical function of your ear, the pinna, and all of that. The Coachella, is that it? But honestly, I've kind of forgotten a lot of what I knew in that regard, and I just kind of take it for granted at this point that yes, horizontally you want it to sound good. It may not matter as much vertically. So that's how you can get away with an MTM that is vertical but has a narrow radiation pattern, at least through the mid-range, and then it widens up through the treble. And it's interesting to say all that, but then to think back on the Perlison I think it's the S4B that I tested late last year, where it had an arrayed, basically it's like three tweeters, and they call it a mid-range, but it's basically like a tweeter and then a mid-range that's kind of inset, and then another tweeter below it. I think that they even had the same mechanical properties. Don't quote me on that, but when I swept them with the impedance sweep, it basically looked the same. The only difference is probably just attributed to the fact that the mid-range was somewhat horn loaded, but not significantly. But when I listened to that speaker, the one quality that I really noticed was just that the mid-range really stood out, not as far as, levels go. It just stood out in terms of, what you notice. And with anything, when you're doing evaluations of speakers, it's really hard to say that this, is the reason for X, Y, or Z. You just really can't do that. You've got to remove all variables and introduce new ones one at a time and work your way down. That's why the understanding the sound of science is not trivial. And that's why we need to be really thankful for, well, I'm not going to get it right now, but we need to be really thankful for Dr. Floyd Toole and all of his work and his book, and then all the work that came from Sean Olive and pretty much everybody who's put forth effort into helping us understand the result. I was actually looking at something earlier today, and it's totally not audio related, but it's something that we, as people, we just take for granted. We say, okay, there's science backing the rationale for this thing that I was looking at, which I'm not going to get into here. And I think that everybody pretty much universally accepts that as facts. There's probably some crazy people who don't, but audio isn't quite there yet. There's still some unknowns. There's still some areas that maybe haven't been dove into quite as thoroughly as other aspects of audio reproduction and audio production even. But I would say that the vast majority of what we need to know is already captured in the data. I mean, frequency response alone is a huge deal. And that's pretty simple to get, at least if you're talking about in room. You know, if you want to kind of get an idea of what it is that you're listening to in your room that you may or may not like, something sounds a little bit hot, you bust out the mic, you wave it around your face, you say, oh, okay, 8 kilohertz has got a bump there. That's a problem. Let me EQ that down. That's how most people operate. So, you know, we're willing to accept the RTA as truthful and as evident for problems that we may have, or I guess things that we want to have. But there's still resistance in just trusting anechoic data when the anechoic data is, maybe it's better, it's more helpful for a broad group of people to see the anechoic data than it is for a broad group of people to see somebody's in-room measurement, because we all know that in-room measurements can have deviations here or there, especially below the Schroeder frequency. So around like 400, 500, 600 hertz below that frequency, everybody's room is going to be pretty different. But we can trust the data, and hopefully people are kind of getting on board with that. You know, yeah, everything's not answerable at this point in time, but if you can have 85% of what you need to know available to you by just going to, you know, a number of websites, mine included, and seeing the data, then, I mean, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? So anyway, I kind of gotten off on a tangent here. Let me scroll through my comments here now that people are hollering. All right, RGA, your use of wave tank was epic. I always try to put impedance on that, and yeah, absolutely, man. And I love that thing, and I'm probably going to start using it more in my videos because I think it's helpful for people to get a visualization, because that's the hardest part about audio, is visualizing what's going on, right? So, you know, as a DIYer, you start out with a jigsaw and a speaker or a drive unit, and then you put it on a baffle, and then you build the speaker and you listen to it and you say, well, maybe that's not what I wanted. And then you go back to the drawing board, and through an iterative process, you start getting closer and closer to what you want. So you had that hands-on experience. And when you had that, that really helps you to understand what the data means. But when you don't understand what the data means, it's hard to, I guess, conceptualize sound waves, you know? So I think the ripple tank is a great way to help people understand and visualize what sound waves are doing in a room. So I'm going to try to use that more often. So yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. If someone can list the speakers he's reviewed and is reviewing that aren't on his site, it would be appreciated. Not listening because I'm rocking out. Okay, well, I guess I can't do that. No. The directive index measurement only includes partially vertical off axis, right? And depends on which one you're talking about. So there is the early reflections directivity index, and then there is the sound power directivity index. The early reflections, yes, only includes a limited window of vertical response, but the sound power would include the entire window. And if you're curious about that, you can download the CTA 2034 specification directly from the CTA ANSI website. It's free. When you go to download it, you'll have to give them your email address, and then they either send you the file or they send you the link, and then you can download it. And you can actually read what the specification defines it as if you don't have Floyd Tools book, or you can go to my website for every data point that I put up or every graphic that I put up at the beginning when I talk about the CTA stuff. I have a little drop down arrow. So if you click that little drop down arrow, it'll pop down and tell you what that measurement consists of. I don't have it wide open because I think people will just glaze over. Nobody's going to read all that, but if you just click that little drop down, you can get the definitions for those. Should a line array center be best, like the Macintosh? You know, I don't know that one. I'll tell you what, if you guys don't mind, let me go and Google the Macintosh XC something. Macintosh XC something 25. I just want to see what it looks like. Oh, good Lord. That thing is ridiculous. Okay. I'm going to throw this picture up here for everybody to see. Give me a second because this is just me rolling through this on my own. Chrome tab, that thing, share. Let me blow this up as best I can. Look at that, you guys and girls. Look at that thing. So it's 3 woofers. I don't know what the woofers are behind it. And then an array of mids and then tweeters. I tell you what, every time I see this Macintosh design, there are other little line array type Macintosh speakers. They all look like they have that little Aura whisper speaker. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but if you do, does that not make you wonder, are they using like $9 little mids, which it's even cheaper than that when you're buying them in bulk? It just really makes you wonder. Now the tweeter, I don't have a clue, but that mid sure as heck looks like an Aura sound whisper to me. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Aura Sound NS2. I think that's it. This is the one that I recently played around with when I was trying to calibrate a microphone. But yeah, see what I'm talking about here? Doesn't it look like it? Oh, it says it's $22 now. I think Madison Sound probably has it cheaper than that. So yeah, to answer your question though, should it be the best? I really don't know. I guess I could see how it. Now, I won't say best, certainly not that, but I guess I could see how it could be good. But then there's also the opportunity for it to be a total disaster, and it really would be in the crossover network. And because of that, I can't really answer that question with any sort of confidence, I guess. But it would be cool to test it. Although I did just see that it's $76,000. Look, I love Macintosh probably more than most people. The amplifiers and their electronics, I guess. And that just kind of stems from a nostalgic background, things I used to see growing up and stopping at hi-fi stores with my dad. So I love the Macintosh look. I do. I know there's a lot of people who don't. There's a lot of people who do. I do. But when I look at their speakers, I can't help but think, what in the world are they doing? But I don't know. Maybe they're all right. I actually did list, or I did request one of their speakers to review, and I'll show you guys. I don't know that I'll be able to get it, but let's see here. And you know what, while I'm thinking about it, I will say I appreciate you all jumping in and joining me and hanging out. I like being able to do this because it helps me to answer questions in real time and helps you all be able to ask questions in real time. There's a lot of things that I just don't have the time to answer because you all know that this isn't my day job. I work a regular, it's not a 9 to 5, it's like a 7 to 3:30. And then I come home and I've got a kid and a wife, and I try to balance my hobby out. But I really love this hobby. I mean, I'm extremely passionate about what I'm doing, and I take pride in trying to provide the best reviews that I possibly can. And, I appreciate you all watching and joining me on this journey, and hopefully we all learn from each other. So enough rambling. Let me go ahead and pull this speaker up that I'm talking about. Am I going to be monitored? All right, this is it. This is the XR50 bookshelf speaker. All right, so for those who don't know, which I think is everybody, this is a exclusive. I spoke with Audio Advice about 2 weeks ago, and I said, I actually emailed them, and then they replied really quickly. And what I requested was, let me get rid of this real fast. All right, let me start over. When I review speakers, how I get them is I get it from the manufacturer. I buy it myself with Patreon funds, or if people donate in PayPal, I'll pay for it that way. Or I get loaners, and that's how I get stuff. Now, the manufacturer thing, I don't really have an issue with anybody getting stuff from manufacturers. It's always just, to me, tell me where you're getting it from and just be upfront, and that's cool. I don't worry about people lying and things like that. At least not the people who I watch and read. There are some maybe that are out there that I might be a little bit like, I don't know. But for the most part, I don't really have a trust issue with other audio reviewers. So the manufacturer thing doesn't bother me when somebody else reviews something that was loaned from a manufacturer, and it doesn't really bother me so much. But I try to not have to go to the manufacturer, and it's just a personal thing, really. It doesn't really have anything to do with the quality of the review or anything like that. The reviews are always the same, where no matter where I get it from. But I just try to get it from somewhere else, which then leaves you with loaners or buying myself. Now, buying myself, some of the stuff that I want to review, there's just no way. I mean, I've spent, I don't know, ballparking at maybe $4,000 last year on buying stuff, and then I would sell it off locally or something like that and try to get my money back. The other way then, or the problem with getting loaners is you just never know what you're going to get, right? I've seen other people get products and review them and post the data or post their write-up, whatever they thought about it, and then you come to find out that the product is broken for some reason or another. And that concerns me as a reviewer. It's possible that I could run into that. So far, I don't think that I've had that issue. Now, I have had something show up that I've had to repair, but luckily I didn't post data on it before I repaired it. But that still concerns me. So that's the concern with getting used stuff, is that you don't know what it's been through. So all you can do is just trust that the owner didn't beat it up, or the person before them, etc., did not abuse the speaker. And if the data looks reasonable, then you post it and you review it, right? But sometimes reasonable could be not quite to new or new in box condition. And so there's that little bit of a gray area that concerns me. Give me a second. Let me get some water. Okay. Which leaves me then with, are there retailers that I can work with? Last year, I reached out to B&H Photo, and they were great. Izzy was my contact there, and he sent me some speakers out, and no issues whatsoever. He was like, dude, you don't have to worry about what you say. We're going to send it to you. Our service is to the customer. It's not to the manufacturer. So if it's a crap product, you're doing us a favor by letting us know. And I was like, sweet. But a lot of the stuff that they sell is not necessarily things that I'm interested in or you're interested in. There are some things, but for the most part, it's kind of outside the scope of what I want to review here. So that leaves me with retailers. So I reached out to Audio Advice, and I just emailed them and said, hey, I'm not looking to get paid. I'm not looking for anything free. What I'm looking for is product that you can loan me that I can review. And again, you don't have to pay me. You don't have to do nothing. Just give me an open door return policy with you guys, and we'll figure something out to make it worth your while, right? Because why would they just send me something and then turn around and have to sell it as B stock and lose money? So the trade-off there is all I've got to do is just mention their name and drop an affiliate link. How easy is that? Now, I know some people have concerns about affiliate links. I don't care. My whole thing is, as long as somebody reviewing something is upfront and they tell you that they're using affiliate links, which they're supposed to do, is it's FTC's rule. It's actually against the law to not do that. Same thing with promotions and product placement, things like that. Like, I'm supposed to tell you, but morally, I want to tell you. I want you to know, and I feel better about it. That's how I sleep at night. So with Audio Advice, they'll send me, I think kind of whatever they have, and I will review it, and in exchange, I'll just throw out a link. So this is the Macintosh is one of the speakers that I requested. That's a long, very long-winded way of saying, I'm partnering up with Audio Advice, y'all. Sweet. And that's really going to benefit everybody. That I'm personally speaking, there's always motivation, right? Like, oh, Aaron, you're not doing this for free. Well, yeah, I'm not doing it for free. I do love it. My thing is, as long as my hobby doesn't cost me money, then I'm happy. So I get extra views. I might get some affiliate money if something I review sells, but I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I don't like it. And the cool thing about my reviews is I've got data. So if it looks like crap, I can't hide that. It's the data looks like crap. Anyway, I just think that's cool, and I'm really excited about that. They're actually sending me out JBL Synthesis SCL6. It's an in-wall speaker, and I'm really excited about that. And that's another fine example. Where else am I going to get that speaker? Because Audio Advice is the only online authorized retailer for JBL Synthesis. I do know one person, and I don't know if I should mention them. I want to. So if you're watching this, trust me that I want to mention your name and give you a shout out, but I don't know that you would want me to. And he has offered to send me some JBL stuff in the past. He's actually going to send me a Paradigm 100F speaker, and I'm going to pay the shipping out of that with my Patreon funds. And I'm not looking forward to that cost, but I want to test a speaker I know you guys will be interested in, and that's what Patreon is for. It's for me to be able to do those things. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's see. Can I walk through some of these questions here? Does a live band sound bad in a room because it has good vertical dispersion? I don't think so. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Aaron. Any thoughts on speaker rake angle? I've experimented with it a lot, and slight 1 degree or 2 makes a difference. Do you have any thoughts on what is right? I'm guessing you're talking about like toe in, toe out. And yeah, that's going to vary by the speaker. For example, an easy one that I can always think of when you talk about this is coaxial designs or waveguide type speakers. Usually dead on axis is not recommended, and that is due to the symmetry of the waveguide. So there's internal reflections bouncing around inside that waveguide as the sound is being driven out through that contour. So you're going to have some peaks and dips on axis mainly, and as you go a little bit further off axis, usually those peaks and dips kind of just start to settle out a little bit, and that's why coaxial designs or concentric designs and wave-guided horn type designs are usually best suited for towing them off axis. And it just depends. Some of them are better at 5 degrees. Some of them are better at 10 or 20 degrees. It just depends. Another thing is sometimes you have designs that are good, but for whatever reason, maybe let's say this speaker is perfect except for it has a boosted response, and you don't like that, right? So what would you do? You would just turn it off axis a little bit, and that would really alleviate that. Now, the problem with toe in, toe out, I don't know if it's a problem, but it's a trade-off, is that depending on how narrow or how wide the radiation of that speaker is, it will light up more of your room. So there'll be more reflections or less reflections. And then you start getting into personal likes. I actually am reviewing the JTR 20, let me look at this, 210 HT. And that's a speaker that's kind of like that. You know, it's got a kicked up top end. On axis, it measures fine, but in room, it's got a kicked up top end. So what I'm saying in the review is you can EQ that down very easily. It's a great EQable speaker, or you can tow it out and fire it straight into the room, or I guess straight into the room. And in doing so, you're going to get a little bit more soundstage width. Usually the image and focus would suffer a little bit depending on the wide radiation pattern or the narrow radiation pattern of a speaker. And in this case, the JTR is relatively narrow, so you don't get too much wall interaction as you face it out into the room. And I think that may be a good trade-off. So that's just a couple examples of it depends. And as an analyst, that's my day job. Anytime I'm asked a question about something, my answer is almost always falls back to it depends, because in life, philosophically speaking, in life, there's very little that's black or white. You ask one person one thing, you ask another person the same thing, you may get two different answers. At some point, you're going to get some kind of divergence. So I think audio is very much the same way as daily life is. You know, it depends. You got to figure out what works for you, what makes sense. Some designs trade off one thing for another, but there still are pretty terrible speakers out there. And luckily, I don't think I've run into any recently. If I do, I'll be sure to let you guys know. No. All right. Would a plus shamed speaker with a tweeter in the middle be the best of both worlds, even if it looks funny? Okay, I'm not quite sure I follow that. Maybe ask again. I'm not sure what the A plus shamed. I'm sure it's a typo. Let me know. Eric Albert, hello. Hey, man. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let me roll back up here. Keith, I don't know how I missed this. First of all, Thank you for the super chat, dude. That's awesome. That will help go toward paying down on the shipping for that paradigm I was just talking about. That's awesome, dude. Very much appreciated. Regarding the speaker crossover I'm redesigning, how would you feel about the impedance dropping as low as 2.8 ohm and the upper bass region down from 3 ohm? This speaker is a real pain to work on. So that's going to depend on the phase. Now, I'm getting outside of my depth when I start talking about impedance magnitude and impedance phase and how they kind of correlate. And that's something that I probably should take more time to study. But honestly, when I look at the impedance of something, I look to make sure that it doesn't go below like 3 ohm or something like that, you know, and I just say, okay, that's probably going to work with most separate amplifiers. Or if it doesn't go below 6 ohm, it's probably going to work with most AVRs. And there's a way to calculate the kind of load, the intensity, I guess, and the current draw, or predict, I guess, the current draw of a speaker based on its impedance. And that's what I used to do, but with the EPDR, which is the effective something dissipation something, I don't even remember the definition now, but nobody used it. And it was just one more thing that I was adding that nobody used. So I just quit using it, honestly. If I'm answering your question, somebody else may have a different answer. So keep this in mind. If I'm answering your question, I would say if I've got a separate amplifier, then I'm probably not going to worry too much. When you say upper bass region, you know, if that's something I can also use a crossover to mitigate, you know, like let's say it dips down to 2.8 ohm at, I know it's not upper bass, but let's say it's 80 hertz, right? If I'm going to use a crossover there and I'm going to use subwoofers, then it's not that big of a deal. So, you know, I know that's kind of a crappy way to get out of answering your question. It's not a real answer, but it's just, you know, my perspective on it. If I'm looking at this speaker and I see this kind of thing, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm going to tell people, hey, if you've got a separate amplifier, then you're probably going to be fine. But again, this is without me seeing the phase, and I'm just assuming the phase is going to be relatively nominal. But thank you for the question, and thank you again for the super chat. Can you run the ScanSpeak 18W in the doors free air? Yeah, you can run anything in your car. I mean, really, and that's not a smart aleck answer at all. Think about your crossovers, right? So if you so the 18W is low QTS speaker, and when you put it in the car door, you're not putting it in an enclosure, so you're not changing the Q. So QTS is QTC, which means that at the low frequency, at a FS where QT is, it's going to start unloading. And are you playing it that low? So let's say the FS, I don't know what it is, but let's just say that it's 30 hertz or low 20s. Just 30 hertz is fine. We'll say that. Don't play them down to 30. Generally, I would say with the ScanSpeak, unless you're going to put it in an enclosure, I would treat it like a real mid bass. And remember, this is car audio, so you're going to have the near side null anyway. And if you haven't watched my video on that, let me know in the comments and I'll link it. And you'll want to use a subwoofer if it's behind you to help fill in that near side null. I generally don't recommend people use mid bass drivers in car audio below 80 hertz anymore. I used to do it. I used to run 10-inch mid bass down to 40, 50 hertz. I know plenty of people still do it. Every car that I get into, I can tell you right away, as soon as the first bass note hits in any of my guitar tracks, I can tell you right away if they're crossed below about 80 hertz or so, because what you hear is the sound gets sucked straight to the door, the left side door panel, if that's your driver's side. It's just straight down. And when you measure the response in the car, you'll see that. There's a big hole right there. So most people who are new would try to fill that hole in by EQing it up, and that's a terrible idea. Never EQ a null. And the reason for that is if it's acoustic null, then you're not going to bring it up, but you're going to be sending more power. So acoustically, it's not going to change as you EQ it. But electronically or electrically and mechanically, you are changing what that speaker is playing, and you're basically just boosting it. You know, just keep boosting it, throwing more at it. You're going to wind up frying that speaker, blowing it out. It's not a good thing to EQ up a true room or car null that's caused by the acoustic interference, right? Now, if it's a mechanical thing, you might be able to EQ it, but most likely, I would recommend you not do that. But to answer your question, you can watch your crossover point. Hey, Facebook user, you're welcome for the stream. I wish Facebook would tell me who's replying. Sorry, let me roll back down here again. RG Cochlea, thank you. That's the word I don't know. Did I say Coach? I said Coachella, didn't I? It's because I was just reading about how Kanye was saying that he wasn't going to do, was it Coachella? That he wasn't going to do Coachella because Billie Eilish, he thought Billie Eilish made fun of, what's his name? Travis? Gosh, Travis Scott, yeah. That's stupid, man. Kanye, come on, Kanye. Dropout, I love that. Late registration, loved it. After that, dude, you're too crazy. I can't listen to you anymore. All right. No. Shaped. Okay. Hey, let me go back up to your question now that I got you. Would was a positive shaped center in the middle be the best? See, I'm still not quite sure I get your question, so please ask again. It's probably something simple. My brain ain't functioning right now. Eric Albert, you're driving home. Be safe, man. Be safe. Do people out there not realize that sound is waves? Well, I don't know. Did you when you were born? At some point, I mean, it clicks for us, right? If you've been doing this for a while, if you've worked with it, it makes perfect sense. But when you're starting out, I didn't know the sound was waves. I was a teenager that had some subwoofers in his car, and I was like, this is awesome, dude. I mean, we all learn, and that's why I do this channel. It's to help people as best I can and just to be able to enjoy the hobby, man. I just love it. Good morning, and my fellow AV summiteers. Oh, crap. That's super early, showing my support. Hey, man. Thank you. That's awesome, dude. Gonna miss the rain down in Africa. All right. Y'all got to hear that. Hi, Aaron. Although you have already said it's difficult to attribute XYZ to cause ABC, do you perhaps have any clue as to what in the spinorama can point to an experience of a tweeter standing out? Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the tweeter standing out, a couple different things enter my mind, so bear with me as I go full ADHD on you. Number one, is it all level only? Is it the entire tweeter standing out, or is it a specific frequency? Now, these things can all be found in the spinorama data. If you're looking at just the spinorama, the CEA 2034 data, then look for the early reflections, little dashed blue line, or is it the solid blue line? Anyway, the early reflections, that'll kind of give you an idea. But if you're looking at my data, then I'll also provide the estimated in-room response. Look at that. And let me go and pull an example real fast of something maybe that would kind of give you a better idea of what to look for. And I normally don't put it in type, but I will put it in, let's see here. Just bear with me while I try to find an example. I normally will mention it in my video review. No. Okay, so there's one. That's one example. Let me go find a better one. Okay, so I've got two examples up here, and we're going to start off with, we'll do this one, share. Okay, this is the estimated in-room response for the Polk XT20. It's one of the bookshelf speakers, which I've actually still got it here. I've been meaning to throw it up on Patreon to see if anybody wants to buy it off of me. Which I don't know if they want to, because they're back on sale on Amazon again. I got it super cheap, well, relatively speaking, and then it went up, and then it came back down even cheaper. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Sorry, tangent. All right, so when you're looking at the estimated in-room response, this line right here, usually you're trying to look for a general trend line, okay? Now, the slope of that trend line, basically, if the estimated in-room response is flat, that's gonna sound terrible. Generally, you're looking for a sloped response, and usually you're going from, say, like, I don't know, like a dB per octave. So that would be about if I'm remembering correctly, that's like a 7 dB drop in level from 200 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So if we just kind of drew an imaginary line through here, we can see that as you get to about 2 kilohertz, as you get to this region right here, it doesn't go down anymore. So that gap between that imaginary line would be 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 dB. And that's what would make that speaker sound bright in your room. Okay. Now that's going to be different from the on axis response. So people often confuse on axis anechoic versus on axis in room. Well, first of all, I think if you're talking about in room measurements, probably just don't talk about on axis. Just say in room measurement. And that'll help clear up the confusion right there. Anechoic on axis, ideally it's flat. You know, you basically it's signal A equals signal A, in equals out. But when you get into a room, you have the combination of added reflections. And at low frequencies, those reflections aren't so much reflections anymore. They're just buildup of sound waves. So you get a boost in the low end. And to keep things from sounding too bright, you want a slow decline in the frequency response at your measured position. And when you have a flat in-room response, that's going to sound very, very bright. It's just terrible. I've never, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I thought that's what you wanted in the home audio. So I used to tune to a flat curve, and I never understood why I hated it until I picked up Floyd Toole's book. I think it was like 2009 or so. And I kind of read it, and it didn't 100% make sense, but I was just like, okay, I don't want flat in the room. Let me target a sloping curve then. And I did that, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then, you know, I started to understand a little bit more. Give you another example. This one is the Polk R100. Now, this one actually looks a little bit better. You can see the mid-range is kind of slowly tapering down, but then all of a sudden you've got a distinct jump into the tweeter. And that speaker also sounded what I would consider bright. Now, if I go back to the Polk XT20, you can see it doesn't have that distinct jump. You know, it gets to this point and it just kind of plateaus off. So this one didn't sound as bright to me as this one did. And this one sounded more bright because there was a more distinct jump. And really what I'm getting to is that it can be overall tweeter level, or it can be a specific frequency response issue. Like if you've got a peak at 8 kilohertz and it's, you know, an octave or so wide, then it's going to sound very sibilant. If it's just the overall level of the tweeter, then it may sound too forward, you know, depending on what kind of subjective terms you like to use. But there's a lot of intricacies when you're talking about that. But that's kind of the general thing that I look for. And I hope that helps. Hello from France. I went to France 3 years ago. Man, Paris was awesome. It was. We went to Disneyland in Paris too. And when we went, we didn't know about Bank Day. You guys have Bank Day there. So the first couple days, we were there in May. The first couple days we were there, or was it June? I don't know. You know better than I do. You know what Bank Day is. We were there for a couple days and nobody was at Disneyland. We were like, man, this is awesome. It was me, my mom, my wife, and my kid. And we were like, this is so awesome. And then all of a sudden the crowds, like after the second day, just piling in. And we were, what is going on? Bank Day is going on. And Bank Day was the day that we had chosen to actually go into Paris, having not known any of this. So we did all the typical tourist stuff. The Louvre was sold out well before we got there. We had no chance of getting tickets to the Louvre, but we wound up walking around the city, and that's just a great time. I would really love to go back there again sometime. So anyway, hello from the United States. Let's see here. Paul Orr. Man, I remember you left me a really cool, positive message, and I appreciate that. After your review of center channel speakers, I'm sold on the SVS speakers. I'm going back and forth between the Prime Pinnacle with the center for LCR and Ultra Bookshelf. Yeah, so this is one thing I would like to address as well. I really tried to not make that video come across as a shootout, because that was not the intent at all. And I think everybody, you know, understands that. The speakers that I happen to use were the ones that I either bought myself or the ones that I was loaned. So SVS loaned me theirs and KEF loaned me theirs. And the thing about SVS and KEF is because I expected that their speakers are going to do well based on the design. The KEF is a coaxial concentric design, 2.5 way, which I thought was 3 way, but I found out it was 2.5 way. And then the SVS with the tweeter and then the mid below it and the two woofers on the side was a three-way design. So I expected that they were going to measure well. And I even emailed the people at KEF and the email at SBS, and I said, look, I'm going to do like an educational type video on center channels and the problem with most of them, and I expect your speakers to do well. Would you mind loaning me some out? And there was zero hesitation from either of them, which, yeah, I mean, it's free marketing for them, but they didn't have to do that, you know? Like, they didn't have to say, yeah, we'll send you something out, because I was about to buy the SVS. I was actually on Amazon and I was about to buy it. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to email them and ask. And so anyway, I just thought that was really cool. And I wanted to give both of them a shout out while I'm here and let you all know that they support, you know, even when the results don't look great. It's just like, okay, well, we're still going to send you some stuff. So I thought that was really cool. I don't have any experience with any of the SVS speakers other than the subwoofers and that center channel that I chose. Make sure you go back and you look at my data for that SVS, because it's not great on axis, but it does take well to EQ. It's not terrible by any stretch. But the great attribute about it is it has really wide horizontal radiation, and that makes it a really good choice for a center channel speaker, especially, you know, in that price range. But just pay attention to my measurements and the estimated interim response of that speaker, because you may want to equalize that speaker a little bit if you have the ability to do that. So just kind of putting that out there. How much do you recommend an oscilloscope to check the electronic side for signal quality aside from, you know, at this point, I don't think it matters. Not unless you're a tester. You know, if you're a reviewer or a tester or something like that, then sure, get an oscilloscope. But I think at this point, you can just use the math. I mean, especially if you're asking about in regards to the setting gains on amplifiers and DSPs. I mean, most all of them are putting out like 4 volts or 5 volts output unbalanced. And, you know, just use the math. JL Audio has a great website for calculating the math. But the other thing too is, if this is car audio related, keep in mind the signal to noise, because there's some amplifiers that they're just noisy. So when you're turning the gains up, all you're doing is just amplifying that noise. But yeah, just directly to answer your question, I don't think you need to worry about getting the oscilloscope at this point. I'd do it because I'm a nerd, but I don't really know if it's worth spending the money. So I'm not going to necessarily tell you, yes, get an oscilloscope. Would I entertain having a company be one of your, or is it creating? No, I wouldn't do that. I mean, for all I know, I've got one and I just don't know it. But I would not do that. I've had companies offer to pay me not pay for me to review their stuff. I guess like when something's come up, okay, a manufacturer recently has loaned me some stuff to review, and they've got a lot of different DSP options. And they said, would you be willing to test these other ones and we'll pay you for the time? Now, to me, that's not out of the ballpark of an acceptable request. And it's not really out of the ballpark of me doing that. I mean, realistically speaking, if it doesn't make it into the review and it's just something on the side and it's something extra they're asking for, then yeah, I mean, if somebody else did it, I wouldn't fault them for it, but I'm not going to do that. Luckily, I'm in a position where I've got enough support on the channel where I don't have to depend on additional money from manufacturers. And that's an area that I just personally don't want to get into. And I am part of a group of Daily Hi-Fi. And for what it's worth, I don't get paid for Daily Hi-Fi. I just told those guys, let it go to Tim, the editor. And that's just, another one of those things where I feel like money kind of gets weird. I would rather make any kind of money that I make off of my channel organically through, just being upfront. Hey, I'm using affiliate links, Patreon or PayPal donations. And that's enough for me. Again, as long as I can stay afloat and pay for the things that I want to review, I'm good. I don't need $500 for a sponsor. However, if you guys watch some of the videos that I watch, like I watch Steve-O, great podcast. I mean, just great. He had Jodie Sweetin on there from Full House. I've still got the hots for her. My wife knows. It's okay. Anyway, he does the manscaping ones, and there's another Pat the NES Punk, a Nintendo video game oriented podcast guy that I'll watch, and he does Manscape. If Manscaping contacted me, then I guess, like if it's totally unrelated to audio, I'm fine with that kind of sponsor though. Anyway. How do I measure planars or omnis? At this point, I haven't. I would just measure them the same way using the Clipple. So I'll put it this way. I would measure it if I saw something that didn't look right. I would take it outside. I would measure it using my standard quasi-anechoic measurement or a ground plane measurement. I would verify that everything makes sense, and then I would go on. If it doesn't make sense with the NFS measurement, then I would dig into why, and I would just contact Clipple and say, "Hey, here's what I've got going on. Can you help me?" They've always done that. Always been great. I mean, seriously, I bugged them last week. I must have emailed them. I'm not kidding. Probably close to 15 times total over the span of like 2 weeks, asking about baffle wall measurements and then other unrelated things. And they always reply so kindly. I'm like, I know they got to think this dude's an idiot. We got to quit emailing him back, but they still do. So, if I've missed anybody, I apologize. I know I'm going kind of slow, and this thing's kind of skipping around. If two speakers have the exact same frequency responses, including volume, bass extension, low enough distortion of the listening position, is there? No, there's not. But there will never be, ever, two speakers that have the exact same frequency response, ever, period. Why do I say that? Because you're not just talking about one radiation point. You're talking about a sphere of sound going out into the room and then coming back at you. Or let's just say we take it into outer space and we measure it. There's no sound in space. Okay, let's say we take it into, measure on the near field scanner. You're never going to get two speakers that are dead on the exact same because of tolerances in the parts, the actual woofers, the tweeters, or the crossover components. I mean, I've been measuring drivers for a long time. You can also look at Vance Dickinson. He does measurements for Voice Coil magazine. Go and look at his driver test when he does sample comparisons. Even the best of the best brands like Scanspeak and Bleesma, they have variances of maybe as much as a dB. And that's going to matter. So I think I see this question asked a lot, and there's a lot of things that people don't understand about it, I think. And I hope that doesn't come off the wrong way, but it's people try to boil things down into that one question almost as, sometimes I see it used as a gotcha. And when they do that, that's how I know that they don't know what they're talking about, right? Because if you're talking about just one axis of measurement, you're forgetting everything else that's going out into the world or out into the room. You're hearing all of the other stuff. That's why off-axis measurements are important. But then you've got the other factor too, that you have component parts that are going to be a little bit different. So the answer is that if they were the exact same, I mean, within 0.0001 dB in every measurable way possible, they are going to sound the exact same. But you will never, ever find a speaker that does that. Even electronic controlled DSP ones, maybe they will. But generally speaking, I think it's safe to say you're never going to find any. Let's see here. $10, dude. Thank you, for real. I appreciate that. That's that will go straight into helping cover the cost of those Paradigm founders. Port stuffing of speakers and subs. Is there a chance this might cause any issues other than limiting the low end extension? Is port stuffing a good idea for small rooms to tame the boomy bass? The last one, yeah, no, that's actually a good way. And the more I measure speakers, I'm getting more and more okay with not measuring or not reviewing speakers that are full range, even when I feel like they should be full range. There's more now on the home theater side, especially, that will have a sealed enclosure and they'll roll off at like 80 hertz or 100 hertz with the typical 12 dB per octave slope. And they do that for a reason. One, they expect that you're going to use a subwoofer. And the other one is they don't want to, highlight any additional modes that they don't need to try to hit. I mean, there's no reason for them to try to get down that low because they're going to be crossing the subwoofer. The port stuffing of speakers and subs, is there a chance this might cause any issues other than limiting the low end extension? Yes. what you could do, because you think if the speaker, so let's say we've got a speaker that the manufacturer does not recommend port the stuff in the port. They don't send you any kind of bung or anything to close it up with, so it's expected that you're going to use it as configured as ported. If you stuff that port, then you're going to change the Q, the mechanical resonance point of the speaker or of the driver, as well as the FS. And most of the time, what you're going to do, I say most of the time, I mean just kind of based off of my experience, you're going to make that enclosure, you're going to change it. You're going to make it too small. That could lead to heating up the voice coils sooner, basically thermaling it out sooner. That could also lead to overexerting its mechanical limits as far as excursion goes. So it could bottom out. Those are the things you got to watch out for. I actually learned that lesson the hard way back in 2002. I think I had I bought a Rockford subwoofer kit from Crutchfield. So it came with, I don't remember the amp, maybe like a 301S and 210s and a sealed enclosure prefab. Everybody was talking about going ported. So what did I do? I cut holes in that bad boy, stuck some PVC pipe down in there. I think the speakers and the subwoofers lasted a day before I just blew them. I didn't know what I was doing, but sometimes the best lessons to learn are the hardest ones to learn, right? Anyway, so hopefully that helps. Stream. You're awesome. I really appreciate. Dude, no problem. I appreciate your support. And yeah, man, enjoy those scan speaks. I used to use them. I use them AP in my car, a periodic enclosure. And I would recommend maybe doing that if you can. If you can. Okay. Keith J, have you experienced, first of all, $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. Very much appreciated. Have you any experience with acoustic elegance and their dipole? So I've got tons of experience with acoustic elegance, but not their dipole drivers. John, actually, I mean, I don't know. I'd consider him a friend, I guess. I mean, I know him through Facebook and I know him through ordering tons of his speakers over the last decade plus. The IB15s, the IB15HTs, and the IB15AU, the SBP15, the SBP15AU. I've used them all. I bought them all and I've used them all. Just AE makes incredible stuff. I don't know if they're still having the issue with, keeping up with inventory. I know that was one thing that a lot of people had issue with. It was a long lead time for a lot of stuff just because they had issue with inventory. So hopefully he's got that resolved. I should maybe reach out to him sometime and request a speaker to review. I'm considering open baffle 3-way design for a truly full range tower speaker. Yes. And I tell you what, I don't know if you've seen this one, and I apologize to all of you who are watching who probably don't care about this, but, man, I need to show you this speaker if you haven't seen it. I think it's like the Orion or something. I feel like that's the name of it. Oh, watch me not be able to find it now. Oh, this is it. Ozone speakers. All right. Let me show on stream here. Open new tab. Is this it? Okay, let me get this back up real fast. Okay. See that? How awesome is that? I don't know exactly which drivers, and it's all ran off of a, I think it's was it the Behringer DCX? Or is it the DEQ? Maybe it's both of them. I can't 100% remember. But that thing looks awesome. And I saw that years ago, and I thought, oh, I want to build that. That just looks so awesome. Okay. All right, so I'm back. Anyway, that's really all I've got. I mean, honestly, I'd say go for it, man. If you've got a design that somebody else or that you're looking at that doing, go for it and report back for sure. Let me know what you find here. Come back here and let me know. Tristan, the audio guy, do you prefer home theater audio or car audio? I follow you since you were pretty informative on the car audio forums. Thanks for your cool reviews. Hey, man, no problem. I enjoy both. I'm more into the home audio. Okay, so as far as listening goes, it's car audio because I drive 40 minutes to work one way and 40 minutes back. So it's car audio. But the funny thing is I listen to a lot of podcasts now, so go figure. But as far as like reviews and testings go, I enjoy home audio more because there's just so, with car audio, you've got drivers, right? And you've just got raw drivers, and there's only so much difference there is between, that was a bad sentence. There's only so much difference between different drivers, right? I mean, if they're all 6.5, they're all going to start beaming roughly around the same point. Some of them may go a little bit lower in frequency. Some of them will control their breakup better above the beaming point. But for the most part, there's just not a lot of personal interest with drive units anymore. Now, I do have some purified drive units here that I'm going to measure at some point. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. With home audio speakers, right? So you have drivers, but they're put into speakers, and crossovers and baffle step and diffraction and different designs like cardioid and dipole and just, all the different things that you can do with the driver in a speaker. That's what really interests me. And as far as, trying to share information, I think that's probably the best area for trying to share information, really. So anyway, no, good question. I appreciate that. I know cables matter, but how much so? Yeah, I don't get into cables matter, man. I mean, I use whatever I can afford, whatever I can get my hands on. I use anything from Amazon to, there's a company, or I guess maybe a company, a fellow out of, I think maybe it's China, but their website is GHENT, and they custom make cables, and they're not crazy expensive. They're actually really, really budget friendly. I've been using those for a long time. My buddy Jason Bartholomew, a car audio buddy, was the one who told me about them initially, and yeah, I think they're great cables. So that's what I would go for. I mean, I'm just not one to get into this whole cable nonsense. And the other thing too is, why do people argue so much? Like, cables don't matter, cables matter, snake oil. I mean, I know where I stand, and that's good enough for me, right? Like, I don't need to have an internet debate with somebody about what I believe in when they're not changing my mind. I mean, some things I'm definitely open to having my mind change, but I've been doing this for long enough. I don't need to change my mind about what cables, or how much cables matter and how much money I need to spend on cables. So, thank you, sir, for the $10 super chat, man. That's awesome. Hello, sir. Not sure if you ever discussed this, but between Dutch and Dutch, 8C or Key 3, which do you prefer and why? By the way, love your center channel video. Woo! You put me in a predicament here. I actually do plan, I swear, I do plan to create a video about that. It's just something I don't think about because it's not in front of me, right? Like, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But yeah, to me, it really just kind of boils down to, what do you need, right? I think both of them, number one, I think both of them are fantastic. The other thing is that you can EQ them both. I mean, you can do a lot of EQ work with both of the speakers. Dutch and Dutch 8C, because it has the two subwoofers on the back and they're two 8-inch subs, that one has lower bass extension. So to me, that's the better choice for me, right? But if you have a smaller room, because my living room that I would use them in, I wouldn't use them for home theater. I would use them for listening, like a listening room. My living room's pretty large. It's a big open floor plan. So even if the space isn't that large, it extends out into a hallway, into a dining room, into the kitchen. So it's a lot of volume to fill up with bass, and those 8Cs have no problem doing it. Now, the keys have plenty of bass, but I'm a bass junkie, right? Like, in my truest form, I love loud music. I know I shouldn't, but I'm just being honest. I do. So that's why I would probably default to the 8C. But I think both of them, honestly, are great options. I think also that I'm supposed to be getting the BXT in for the Key 3. We talked about that when I sent the Key 3 back, and it was proposed that maybe I could do that. And I can only imagine how incredible the Key 3 sounds with the BXT module below it, with those, I think it's 12 other drivers, just something ridiculous. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question. And I'll try to do like a true analysis on it, right? Because my personal opinion aside, I think the data, comparing things side by side in the data would give people a better understanding of what the give and take there is, So anyway. Anyone have any experience with seismic audio amps? I think you asked me that, and I know you're not asking me because you're saying anyone, but I'm just mentioning that I do not. But I'm putting it up here so people can see, and if they do, they can respond to you in the comments. Laminar flow versus turbulent. Seems could be the issue. Dude, you're taking me back to, what is it? Fluid dynamics. That was actually a good class. That was my first like real engineering class. And I actually had a really good teacher. Let's see here. Okay, pardon. I mean, tilting the speakers back. That's what rake angle is. Oh, rake angle. Oh, I totally misunderstood you. Well, I gave a long-winded answer for turn the speakers off axis. All right. Rake. Actually, really, I think the rake angle could be the same thing as when you're talking about turning speakers on and off axis horizontally. The Arindal, and you can actually see them right over my shoulder here. They've got like a 4 or 5 degree rake to them. And the interesting thing about that is when I published the on-axis data, I knew people were going to flip because it's got a tilted down on-axis response, right? Because that's with the microphone at the tweeter level. But the speaker is short, okay? So when you sit down, the tweeter's like way below ear level. It doesn't even make sense. The speaker's tilted back, so that means the tweeter then is actually pointed at your ear. And it has a really good sound to it. So that's a good case for having a speaker with a rake where it's shorter. It means the tweeter level is going to be too low in terms of height, but when it's tilted back a little bit, that puts the angle of the reference axis toward your ear. So I think designs like that, when they're thought out, kudos. It's a great design. My younger friends love more bass. Does that mean by default that I'm younger? I like it. I'll take that. That's a compliment. I always wonder if there's a big difference in what younger customers like versus the older crowd. Like what speakers do 20-year-olds like? Since hearing kind of changes as you get older. That's something I don't know. I'd be curious to know. I can tell you that based on the YouTube analytics, that the majority of people who watch my content are between like 30 and 40. And there's outliers there for sure, but the majority of them are kind of right in that region. I think based on my own experience, people in their early 20s, probably still coming out of that bass head phase, especially if you're from the car audio area like I was from. And then you start trending more toward you're tired of having your brain rattled around. You just want something that sounds good overall, and then you start getting into the sound quality aspect of things. But maybe not everybody. Sorry, you guys are doing a lot of talking here too, so I'm having to go roll through here. Y'all are making fun of each other. That's funny. Oh, me. Sorry. Okay. You mentioned the paradigm earlier. Listen to the Founder 80F today on the short list now. Interesting. Audioholics did the review on the 100F, and I actually talked to the guy who's sending the 100F out to me, and I said, "Do you think it's even worth me doing it?" And he said, "Well, yeah, go ahead and do it anyway. I'd like to see the higher resolution scans, which I'm not knocking Audioholics at all. So nobody read anything into that. I'm just saying that's the truth of it. And he also wanted to see more vertical measurements as well. And it also gives you the in-room predicted response when you're able to measure all around it, give us a better idea. But I will say that I wasn't terribly impressed with what I saw in the Audioholics measurements. And I don't expect mine are going to be different, just, higher resolution, and maybe a little bit extra information too. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. And I've still got your Macintosh cup around here somewhere. Keep up the good work, dude. You keep up the good work. Must be an outlier then at 54. Do you find that music has a calming effect on you during the commute? It depends on what I'm listening to. If I'm like the other day I was listening to Blue Oyster Cult and Burning for You, which I love that song. That song's got some get up and go to it. So I like it. If I'm listening to Highway to the Danger Zone, then I'm probably driving like a maniac. If I'm listening to like Norah Jones and just chilling, then I'm probably just chilling. But yeah, it just depends on what I listen to. Paradigm said their crossovers are proprietary and would not let me see them. Are they hiding something? I don't know. I mean, if I can take them out of the speaker, I will. But that would be weird that they would be proprietary. I mean, crossover design. RGA bass, what's that? You, RJ, you don't even know about bass, man. Have I played with infinite baffle subs over the years? Absolutely. Acoustic elegance, infinite baffle subs, mainly in car audio. I was actually going to do some for my home theater, but we had just moved in and I didn't want to cut out the walls yet. But the funny thing about that is I'm actually thinking about overhauling my home theater, and that's kind of why I've gotten into the curiosity for in-wall speakers. Part of it's for personal reasons, and then part of it is because I know people, have requested me to do some of those kind of measurements. If I do go with in-wall speakers, and the reason I would do that is to give myself more room in my home theater room, because I've got the wall built out about 3 feet, and I've got my JBL Pros stuck in the wall, and then my DIY baffle wall. And I don't know, just part of it is itch, right? Scratching the itch. You just want to try something new. What's that? Idle hands. There's some kind of idle hand saying. Maybe you guys know what I'm talking about, but it's part of it's that. And then the other part of it is, legitimately, it would be nice to push that wall back to where it actually is, give me another 3 feet of space. And then when I review loudspeakers, I can take them upstairs. I don't have to worry about, so the way my baffle wall is built right now, it's covered in foam, just covered in foam. And the other thing is that there are speakers right behind it, right? So when I put a speaker out in front of it to review, then I just worry about the interaction between what's going on behind it. And I have to bring them out even further, closer to me. And it's just kind of a pain. So I'm making up excuses to change stuff. We all do that. Have you considered performing M noise measurements is a new gold standard for Meyer sound? Keep up the great work. I actually used to. I used to do multi-tone testing up until maybe a year ago. And the reason I quit doing it is because nobody cared. I spent a lot of time. I'm talking hours of measurement time trying to provide multi-tone distortion measurements at full range, and I would also bandpass it between 80 hertz to 20 kilohertz, so people could see the effect that excursion from a woofer has on the distortion profiles. So if it's like a BL distortion where it's all through the midband, or if it's a distortion that's born more from the suspension, so the surround spider. And that was interesting to me, but I've rarely got anybody to comment. And I just thought, I'm spending a whole lot of time on doing this, and I don't think anybody's getting anything from it. So I just decided to quit doing it. Now, I may revisit it at some point, but I don't know. I'm just not sure that it's there for me yet again. I can't drive 55 by old rocker makes me hit the go pedal. What about the Sammy Hagar version? Go on and lock me up. All right. Post my face, wanted dead or alive. In the car, one inexpensive addition with my own labor did enhance the audio. Sound dampener behind the door speakers in between the door and door panel trunk. Like, yeah, dude. So I took 2-part epoxy foam and covered all the rails in my car. So trying to essentially not necessarily stiffen up the chassis, but make it not hollow. So the seat rails are filled up. The B pillar area was filled up. C pillars are filled up. Didn't touch the A pillars because I didn't want to mess with that, with the airbags and stuff. I was just like, the trunk was filled up, and this is 2-part epoxy foam, so it expands and then it hardens in place. And I had 2 15s IB in the trunk. I had 2 Pro Audio 10s in the kicks that were vented externally. So I had 4-inch holes cut in the firewall of that car. This is a Civic. And then I had Pro Audio BMS coaxials in the A pillars. And that car got stupid loud, and it sounded fantastic. One of the best cars I've ever heard, if I say so myself. And it could compete with SPO guys. I mean, within reason. Obviously, it wasn't breaking records, but that car was dumb. And I do kind of miss it sometimes, but, my new car install is a lot more simple than that. And I kind of like the simplicity of my new one. And it makes me not mess around with it so much. Thoughts on in-wall Polk? I guess the LS has ring tweeters. I have no idea. I don't no familiarity, no experience with those particular speakers. So I can't really hazard a guess at this point in time. Yeah, most people don't care about distortion profile and multi-tone measurements unless they're very serious about driver design DIY people. I agree. I think that that's really where it's best used for, is for the DIYers. And I'm not saying that distortion doesn't matter. I'm saying that I don't think it matters enough for the people that I review products for. And generally speaking, I'm more concerned with the compression than the distortion profiles. And I say that because, in my experience, when I start to hear things go wrong, it's usually because the speaker's unloading, like a woofer is unloading or something along those lines. It's rarely, if ever, due to something that I can attribute and point back to that's a distortion issue. And if you use the proper crossovers, then you really don't have to worry about it, right? I mean, maybe it's overstating it, but 50 points, you got me, bro. That's right. Okay. I'm thinking of making a suit with bass shakers attached to it. Crazy or quite sensible? Dude, go for it. And when you say a suit, please make it like a legit suit, like a button up, all that kind of stuff, Make it a real suit. All right, I'm going to roll back up here and make sure I didn't miss anybody. Oh, I did miss one. $10 super chat from Mo VZ. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, man. I really do. Upgrading my HT speakers to the Arendal 1723 towers and center, but because the way my room is my side surrounds will be in walls. What in walls do you recommend thinking about the monolith THX 360? So I'm just now getting into in walls. Don't have much experience there at all at this point in time. I will tell you, stay away from anything that's on wall. That's terrible. On wall speakers are. I'll have a video about that soon. You guys will understand what I'm talking about. But I know you're not asking about on wall. I'm just saying. As far as the in wall stuff goes, the ones that I'm actually looking at, I mentioned earlier, it's the JBL Synthesis. What did I say? It was SCL-6. That one looks really interesting. It's got, I think, 4 5.25-inch midwoofers, and then their patented horn design. I think it's like the M2 HDI technology trickle down. Kef makes some interesting in walls, so that's another, and they're really different. So you're talking about Kef with concentric drivers, and then you're talking about JBL with a horn-loaded waveguide tweeter driver, compression driver, I should say. So really very, very different. But I would love to be able to demo both of those and somehow A/B them. I don't think that's even possible, but I would really love the opportunity to do that. The monolith stuff actually does look good. I have seen results from that, and it's pretty impressive. But that's all I really know about in walls at this point in time. As far as what's out there and what's good, I hope maybe within the next year that I'll have tested at least a handful. Have some better evidence, I guess, for us to look and point to. Okie dokie. I'm gonna scroll back up here. Thanks for the funny clips. They make my day better. You are awesome. Thanks for doing this. Well, thank you, Super Silly Skits. You are awesome. Let's see here. Aaron, I'm a big bass junkie as well. Dumped most of my HT budget into 2 JTR RS1s. Love them. Leaning Arendal 1961 series for main surrounds. Any other non-DIY recommendations? Actually, if you're looking at the Arendals, I'm going to guess you might be looking at them because of their size. And for that reason, there's nothing else out there that I can think that beats it. At least not right now that I'm aware of. Now, that may change in a month if I get something better. But those things are super small. I've got a video coming out. I think I'm going to post it on Monday. If you're a patron, though, you can check. I've got the link in my Patreon there for people to go ahead and check that out now. But man, yeah, the Arendal little 1961 bookshelf speaker, if you cross it, at a reasonable point, let's just say, I think I said 100 hertz in the video, but somewhere around there, then yeah, go for it. And I actually, in that video, I do have on-wall measurements for that speaker. And you can see what I'm talking about when I say on-wall speakers are really rough. And I don't know if anybody's going to actually make really good in-wall speakers. And there's a reason for that. I'll get into that in that video. And What's my opinion on dynamic EQ compensating for Fletcher Munson loudness curve? Okay. I think that this is where personal preference comes into play. One thing about the equal loudness curve is we have to hope that the sound that you hear at your seat is calibrated in SPL correctly, so that the equal loudness contour curve that is applied to the volume of the SPL that you're listening at is applied correctly, right? So meaning that there's a fawn table, which we'll just say SPL, and so at a certain, let's say 80 dB, the equal loudness curve looks different naturally than it does at 60 dB, right? Now, I don't know if I'm making this up. I could be completely making this up. But if you had a case where you had an equal loudness contour and you set it up for, let's say, 60 dB, but it was applying the 80 dB contour, then that would not be good, right? That kind of goes against everything that the science is telling you to have gotten you to the point where the loudness contour curve is useful. So if that's a concern or if that's possible, then I would stay away. I don't use any kind of loudness compensation myself, but that's not necessarily from a purist standpoint. It's just because I just don't want to, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. But I don't really have anything against it. I do actually think that it can be useful, especially, when you're talking about it. This goes back to the personal thing, right? So let's say you want a little bit more bass. Well, when you're listening at low volume, you're not going to hear the bass maybe that you want. So you throw the equal loudness contour on there, boom, you got some bass. So that's cool, right? And then as you turn it up, that bass starts to kind of be tampered a little bit. Same thing with the highs. So I would say that's up to you. I don't think anybody can tell you that that's right or wrong per se, because that comes down to preference. When I talk about more objective things, it's usually geared toward the speaker performance, right? Because you can't make a bad speaker sound good. You can't fix a speaker that has a very poor crossover design with anything. All right. I mean, you could pull the crossover out and you could replace it with a better one or replace it with an active DSP crossover, but then that's not the same speaker anymore. So the real underlying purpose of what I'm trying to do in the reviews is to help us understand, the pros and cons of different speakers. And, occasionally we'll highlight one that's just straight junk. And we know, hey, there's no saving the speaker. So just don't even use it. Not unless you have the frequency response curve in your ears of the opposite of that speaker, I guess, that would just align perfectly, right? I'm scrolling back up here. I'm gonna keep going. David, thank you. And dude, you're always one of the first ones to reply or hit a like or something like that whenever I post stuff. So I just want to tell you that I appreciate your support. So thank you. Got one of their cases, Ghent Audio. Yes, Ghent Audio. This is the RCA company that I was talking about earlier. They make everything though. I mean, like speaker cables, RCA, XLR. They might make USB cables. I don't know. They tons of stuff on their website. It's crazy. Let's see here. All right. Don't think you can correct comb filtering with DSP other than delay, so they are aligned. No point trying to boost cut comb filter. Yeah, right. Now surely there's some caveats, right? If people want to dig down into the nitty gritty of what's causing the comb filter, maybe you can fix it. But kind of what I was saying about speakers, right? If you have a poor passive crossover and it creates some comb filtering because maybe the tweeter is crossed too high, so you've got lobing from the midwoofer, and then you've got omnidirectionality of the tweeter, and things are just going crazy. Can't fix that. I mean, you might be able to tweak it a little bit, but you're not going to be able to fix it because whatever you're doing to on axis is going to be going off axis. You still got different sounds hitting the wall versus what's coming toward you. So yeah, you can't fix that. I agree. All right, I'm gonna roll back down here. DIY audio guy, DIY audio guy. You should change your intro to that. What's up, Justin? How you doing, buddy? Hi, Justin. All right. Our synergy speaker testing in the future. Synergy speaker. Oh, like my mind just went blank. Like the Danley stuff. I don't know. I would like to test more Danley stuff, but and I know there's other, synergy type designs. One thing I have put out there for people in the DIY community is if you are creating a DIY design and you're not doing it to make money, right? Send me the speaker or send me whatever. I'll build it, whatever I need to do. I'll test it and I'll provide you the data and we'll make it better together, right? Like I'll help you figure it out. And then you release the plans to the world. Now I won't do that if you're talking about creating design and then selling it for profit, because I won't be used to make somebody else money. I'd rather spend my time doing what I'm already doing, and that's good enough for me. But if it's to help the community as a whole, as far as a DIY design, something they go out and buy the parts for and build themselves, I'm 100% on board. And that is actually something that I'm working behind the scenes with a couple people. And that is something that I hope to get into maybe sometime this year. I would like to kind of kick around some DIY plans and, do my own testing and just put them out there for everybody just to go out and to buy and build on their own. Because I think the DIY stuff is really fun, man. It's pretty awesome. And I do actually have, while I'm thinking about it, some Dayton designs. Gosh, I can't remember what it is now. Overnight Sensations, I think, was one of them. And I can't remember the other one that I got from them. But Dayton Parts Express, I should say, sent those out to me to review and to build. And then I'll just give them away. I mean, they're not paying me for it. It helps them because it gets their product out there a little bit more. I'm going to be the one to have to put it all together and build a crossover and put the enclosure together and all that. But I want to do that because I want people to understand that there's DIY possibilities. And if you can get started that way, you can learn so much more as opposed to, just going off of what somebody else tells you, because there's a lot of that on the internet, right? Like there's a lot of professionals, armchair quarterbacks on the internet. When I post a review of something and I understand, or I think at least that I understand why certain, compromises were made in design because they've got to make money and it can only cost this much money, right? So that obviously something's going to be left on the cutting floor. I see a lot of people saying, well, they should have done this or that. And it's like, man, whatever. Like you can tell the people who have built a design or designed a speaker immediately, or I should say, you can tell the people who haven't immediately by what they say. Now, there's a lot of people that don't say crazy stuff, but the ones who do, you can usually say that person has never built a speaker before, like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. Toyd's DIY is awesome. Yes, and I'm incredibly jealous of his CNC, and he knows this. I would love to have a CNC. What's funny is I actually bought parts to build one 2 years ago, and then I got so busy with testing speakers, I thought, well, that's never going to happen. So I sold them. I sold them at a loss, but I've still got the metal poles for it. That's kind of cool. Alan Works, need you to test my funky pups. No, bro, I'm good. I think I'll stay away from the funky pups. But you should come up and hang out. We all need to hang out. Get that JL Audio Max on some cars. That was weird. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to end this because my wife just got home from work, and I'm sure she's had a long day, and I'm sure she wants to tell me about it. So, yeah, I think I want to end this now. I do appreciate all of you watching. I can't believe that we've been online for this long. That's crazy. It really was fun. I really appreciate it. I had a good time. Keep an eye out for, well, hold on. Let me answer this one real fast. I'm sorry. Any plans to measuring electronics like a mirror? Yes, at some point. I won't be using an AP because that's crazy money and I'm done. I can't spend that much more money. But Quant Aslam did send me this to use for testing. I don't know if you guys can see this. Where is my face at? There we go. So that will go a long way toward helping me, and when I test electronics, I don't really care if it's a SINAD of 120 or negative 120 dB or negative 100 dB. As long as it's reasonably quiet, I'm good. Mainly, I'm just going to be doing sanity checks on them And it's not something that I'll be doing very often, but it's something that I've always dabbled in. You can look at back on my DIY audio or DIY mobile audio post like 2009. I was testing head units and DSPs and amplifiers way back then. So definitely been doing it for a while. I just don't have or I never had the gear to really allow me to go into it full bore. And now that I've got the Clipple, that's where I spend the majority of my time, because personally speaking, that's what I think matters. I don't really personally care too much about electronics performance, right? I mean, I think you check them for power, and as long as they meet rated power, I'm probably okay with it, and there are companies who don't meet rated power. So kudos to folks like Amir and Soundstage Network for testing electronics. But just personally speaking, that's not something that I'm interested in. And I think that with what I'm able to do, people would benefit more from me just kind of sticking to speakers for the majority of the time. But I will, yes, occasionally dabble in electronics. And I have been doing that, going back over a decade. So it wouldn't be necessarily new to me. It would just be a refresh or reboot, as they like to say in the movies. So again, with that said, I am out. I hope you all have a good weekend. Have fun watching the Super Bowl. Enjoy watching Dr. Dre, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick, and who else was going to be there? Can't even remember. I'm going to be Snoop Dogg. Can't forget Calvin Broadus Jr. Can't forget Calvin. All right. You guys have fun watching